Hey, welcome back. We're live. It's me, Chev Sanders, aka Chev GPT, and this is the crew for Bet On It, your go-to betting source for the most profitable same game parlays and also as well to plays to make. And it is brought to you by ProfitX. ProfitX is a profit or peer-to-peer sports prediction market that is set up for you to beat the odds. You can make wagers and eliminate the house by playing against your making plays and tickets against your friends and allowing you to maximize those odds and find odds for the best plays on the market. So sign up with ProfitX today, use promo code FFD and get a deposit match up to, I believe, $50. Oh, we'll check the numbers on that. But anyway, I'm here with two of the sharpest minds in the fantasy football space, and now we're going to bring you some of that math and probabilitizations with a statistics guy. I've got Jeremiah Retzlaff and Joseph Bryan from Quality Stats. You guys have seen him. He's got the model that either makes you really happy or really pisses you off when we talk about fantasy players. And now he's got a model for making money betting. So let's tap in, Coach. But first, Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, happy to be here. You'll see me at Player Profiler with you, Chev. We're on Trade Gods, a couple other different shows, Best Ball Night School. I like to play in all different markets: Dynasty, Redraft, Keeper, Best Ball, betting. Everything informs each other, and it makes you sharper, and it keeps you abreast of what's going on. I was talking to Joseph. We were talking to Joseph just a couple days ago about Romeo Doubs. Sure enough, Romeo Doubs ends up scoring a touchdown. So all these things inform each other and they help you. So part of your betting and your fantasy, if you're into fantasy shows, understand that this is an applicable show for you. Whereas if we're talking fantasy, you can get that angle on betting. And of course, tonight we have different plays that can absolutely help you for the different peer-to-peer markets that you're in, or the different books that you might be after. And of course, for your lineups, it's Friday night and you're trying to make some of your start-sit decisions. You have things that you need to do. Well, sometimes maybe a line that's out there on a player is going to help determine, maybe it's the over-under on a game we'll talk about, where you're like, okay, I'm going to get more fantasy goodness out of this. So there's more straight plays, and then, of course, team plays and management plays. So there's a lot offered to this show. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude. I'm excited to be able to do this with you since we're, this is just like another one of the shows that we're currently working on. But let's get to the big brain behind this operation. This guy rocks your world, and also as well too, now he's going to put a lot of money in your pockets. Joseph Bryan, tell the people more about what we're into here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chev. I hope that I hope that I can deliver some money to people's pockets. Last year, using the methods that we're going to talk about here, I hit 4 various low probability bets. The 4 bets had a probabilities of 1%, 2%, 3%, and then another bet of 2%. And I hit all 4 of those last year using this method. I basically like to bet on very high upside plays that have very low probabilities of happening. We'll discuss that in a second. But I currently write for PFF, and I have been doing football analytics for probably like 7 years at this point. I was taking some stat classes in college and thought, let's do this with football. I think it'd be fun, and it's been real fun doing it. But yeah, I currently write for PFF, and I actually had a gig with an NFL agency a few years ago. I worked for an NFL agency and helped predict future player outcomes, and which was a real cool thing to do. And now I'm here doing a show with y'all.
Dude, so just to be clear, Joseph's being really humble right now. He's currently got one of the best predictive models in the market in terms of year-over-year reliability, and on top of that, the P Whopper. You're not familiar, you got to get familiar with the P Whopper. You need that P Whopper in your life. So
I think it's the best receiving metric in football. So I'm pretty humble about a lot of things, and I am very confident that it is the best receiving metric in football. At least it's publicly available in some way, shape, or form by me, right? Like it's not exactly You can't go look it up because it is proprietary data that I created off of, but I share tables and information about it. And, hopefully you can glean as much as you can from what I share.
Yes, it is a phenomenal resource of information. If you haven't, go subscribe to a Substack at Quality Stats. Yeah. So without further ado, you're going to have the floor again, because I want you to explain the theory behind being able to nail down such low probability bets with high yield and return on investment.
Yeah. The person that kind of initially introduced me to this idea, his name is Judah Fortgang, at Throw the Damn Ball on Twitter and Substack. But he basically, it's an idea that comes from kind of like Wall Street investing, right? It's a finance idea, but it's basically betting the tails, right? So if you think about, everything has a distribution of outcomes, right? Everything, just because someone's got 30 yards doesn't mean if you repeated that game 10,000 times, they would always get 30 yards, right? Some of those games, they might get 0 yards, and some of those games, they might get 150 yards. And so trying to figure out what are the tail outcomes, and then what are the probabilities that we can hit those tail outcomes, are really what we want to aim at. Because Vegas, for the most part, cares about median outcomes, right? Most Vegas, anything to do with Vegas has to do with median outcomes. And that's what most people deal with. And tail events are not that, right? We want to bet Tucker Kraft getting 100 plus yards, right? We don't want to bet him hitting the over. That's not what we want to do, in my opinion, right? Hitting the over, you have to deal with juice. You have to deal with other things. But if you can figure out, Tucker Kraft's in a really good position to explode this week, I'm going to bet a tenth of what I would normally bet, but I'm going to bet it on Tucker Kraft getting 100 yards, not just his over-under. That's a way you can be significantly more profitable. But the key is you have to identify those scenarios, and you have to be very mathematical about it. You can't just go in and say, man, I think Matthew Golden's going to have 100 yards because I like him. He had no reason to have a decent game, but funny enough, he had 2 great deep targets. And in the future, he might be a really good tail event player, because he has a really wide range of outcomes, right? Like Matthew Golden, he's going to be running those deep routes against man coverage, and he's either going to catch it or he's not. So his median might be like 16 yards, while his alts, you might be able to get a price of like plus 2,000 for him to get 80 yards, right? And that's really the situations we want to try to bet on, are these situations of wide distributional outcomes where, typically a player might have a lower median, but they have a really high ceiling. And that's really what I try to attack in a lot of what I do.
Look, if we're trying to fit a camel through a keyhole, and you seem to have found the proper grease to make this piece work. So we're going to get into some specific examples, some of your favorite plays of the week. But before we do that, do you guys have a particular game? Jeremiah, do you have a game that you want to get into as far as talking through some of your favorite plays this week?
Yeah, for me, it's a storyline narrative and trying to fit that little keyhole in the thinnest of margins. For me, it's going to be the Jaguars and the Bengals, close to a 50.5 over/under total. I've got a 6-leg parlay plus 24.98, $3 pays 75. Of course, you do the math on any kind of dollar amount, but we're close to plus 2,500. And for me, the story that I'm telling myself, all right, Travis Hunter going to play a little bit more on the defensive snaps. We'll see how much that aligns. But Dyami Brown was just a sneaky signing. I see him with his 50 yards plus alt receiving and anytime touchdown. You got very good odds on that. And then I have Trevor Lawrence over 1.5 touchdown passes. So this game is going to run where I think both Burrow and Lawrence can get 2 touchdown passes, and Dyami Brown can be a contrarian play in that. Everybody's going to say, hey, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to eat, even down to Travis Hunter is going to eat. My contrarian, my differentiation is going to be somebody like a Dyami Brown. Pile that in with it's going to run back and forth, right? So give me Joe Burrow with the 2 touchdown passes. I'm not getting greedy with 3 touchdown pass run out. And then I got Chase Brown over 2.5 receptions. Give me that. That just seems like easy money. I think he can get 5 targets and come away with 3, 6 targets and easily come away with 3. But the way Joe Burrow runs and the lack of effectiveness of the Jaguars defense, I'm going to go with Burrow and Brown connecting. And then, of course, a little bit of regression is Jamar Chase, a money player, the 101 in so many formats in your fantasy football leagues. Anytime touchdown, sprinkle that on. So that ends up being just a beautiful 6-leg parlay. Diami Brown, the 50 yards plus all receiving, the touchdown for Diami Brown. Trevor Lawrence over 2 touchdown passes, or over 1.5, sorry, to get 2. Then you have on the Bengals side 2 touchdown passes for Joe Burrow, Chase Brown over 2.5 receptions, Jamar Chase anytime touchdown. So I would want to ask Joseph here, am I going contrarian enough? Am I going storyline enough? How am I going on that path? Am I contrarian enough, or do I need to even think bigger or truncate the amount of legs that I have? Because I have 6 legs here.
I actually, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking both of those. So I prefer even more contrarian, right? Like in a game like this where everyone's thinking, oh, it's got to be a shootout, right? It has to be a shootout. In a game like that, to me, you would start thinking, well, okay, so what if it's not, right? What if we come out and the Bengals are a little bit more run focused than we thought they would be, and say Chase Brown gets a lot more carries than we expect him to get, and maybe breaks off one of those, right? So you could say do an under with Chase Brown having a lot of yards. You could do. And maybe stack that on with like the Jaguars trying to play catch up or something like that. So to me, like 6 legs is a little too much. I try to keep any parlays I do, I try to keep them under 4 legs. Okay. 4 legs is usually my like, and really I aim for 3 or less, right? So 4 is like I start like that's kind of like I call it thoughts of a madman. In my Substack, sometimes I'll add like crazy parlays and stuff like that. It's like, maybe I don't know. What if this happens? Let's just add one more leg and put like a 0.1 unit on it, right? Like put a little bit on it. But yeah, I would say the Bengals and Jaguars game, at least from what I've seen in the DFS streets and everything, it seems like that's a game a lot of people are targeting. It's a game that is slated to be fairly high scoring, and my models at least see that game without a lot of edge. Right, so the models that I have show that there's not a lot of edge on that game. Not that that game can explode. That's not what that means, right? Yeah. So that just means that there isn't an advantage for us to play overs in that game. It's that the market is pricing those very fairly, right? Yeah. So the overs that I've seen in that game are just priced better than overs in other games, right? And so I would say to get even more contrarian, think about how can the way that I phrase this in my Substack is to explain it to new people is that it's not about being right more times than being wrong. It's about being right when everyone else, being right when everyone else is wrong, right? Being right when everyone else makes the mistake. And by everyone else, we mean Vegas, right? Or other people if you're playing DFS and you're playing GPPs and stuff. But how can I be right when everyone else is wrong, right? Because that's when you can actually make a lot of money. That's Daniel Jones last week is like the perfect example of being right when everyone else is wrong. No one played Daniel Jones last week. Like no one dealt with him. But if you did, you were right. And that paid off massive, right? If you bet like Daniel Jones getting 2 touchdowns last week, you're probably in the Bahamas right now, right? Like you're not worried about anything because you were right when everyone else was wrong. And so that's where I'm trying to aim is how can I be right when like everyone's thinking this thing's going to happen? It's like, well, but what if it doesn't? What if something else happens? And what if it's completely in the opposite direction from what we think?
Brother, speaking of that, something else, let's get into kind of what you're thinking as far as constructing your tickets for this week. What are you liking? What are you seeing? What's the model giving you? We had a pretty big difference in the model between my outlook for Bryan Thomas and what the model had. So that's pretty interesting. But where is it? Where do you lean? Where do you lean in terms of where you're going to look when you start constructing your ticket?
Yeah, I think just for the people that do watch your regular fantasy shows and talking about that fantasy model is constructed very differently than the models that I make for gambling purposes, right? That model is constructed a little bit differently. It's just using different data sources. It's using different things. But for the models that I make for gambling and for what I'm looking at this week, the main kind of area that I'm trying to attack is the Jets and Bills game. That game is very interesting to me because Justin Fields is the definition of a wide distribution player, right? We talked about it earlier. We want players with wide distributions. Justin Fields, I believe his standard over under is like 190. I think we need to check Profit X for that, but his standard over under is around like 190. Maybe it's clipping up to 200, but it's really probably below that. And he is a player that threw for 350 yards last year in a game, right? He does have the ability to do that. And he has the ability to carry a wide receiver with him as he does that. And I think there's a good chance that the Jets are actually good, right? I think there's a chance that they might just be good. And there's a lot of angles that we can approach with that. And so my model sees a massive passing advantage for Jets passing this week. So just if you were to take this as as an example, right? So if you were to say run 10,000 simulations of this upcoming week, which is basically what my model does, I shouldn't say it's random unnamed sports books, right? Might have Justin Fields throwing for 500 or throwing above 300 yards 500 times. Out of that 10,000 times, they may say he throws for 300 yards 500 times. My model says he's going to throw for 300 yards around 1,500 times, right? So we have a pretty big advantage there, at least according to my model, right? So my model is very, very tuned on 2025. And this is where we either are going to have a big advantage or we're going to lose. And I'm perfectly fine with losing. That's why I bet the tails, right? That's why I bet these situations. Because if I bet 0.1 units on I just need to hit it, 1 out of every 10 times. To make a very nice profit. But in this situation, there is a very nice passing advantage for the New York Jets. And there's a good chance that they are good. At least in 2025, they've proven they can score points against a pretty good defense. And now they're about to play the Bills, who just gave up a lot of points to a team that I think is pretty similar to the Ravens, right? The Jets are like the Ravens light. In a lot of ways, they're just the Ravens, but worse.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a chance that there might be something there, right? So I am very interested in Jets passing, specifically Justin Fields. I'm taking him at 250 plus, and Jets win, right? You can do those together, right? That simple parlay can really make you some money. I forgot. I don't know what the odds are right this moment, but I think last time I checked, I got that at like plus 4,000. You just need two things to happen, plus 4,000, right? The Jets need to be better than we expect, and they need to pass the ball. And boom, you're at plus 4,000 on those two things. I don't know what the odds are right this moment, but that's what I saw last time.
Right now, Justin Fields current over under is 234. So you just need him to, yeah. That's on Profit X right now. So you just need him to, and that's set at like minus 114. So you just need him to get 16 more yards than what the current over under is, and the Jets to win in a game that they're currently underdogs in. And you said plus 4,000?
Yeah, I just want to make sure on that. Just that Justin Fields line, that's probably his passing and rushing yards together. That you just said. His passing over under on random unnamed sports books is 191.
Oh, well, I see that on Profit X as well. I see Justin Fields passing yards for 191 and a half.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what it should be.
The line posted for that.
Yeah.
On Profit X.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure. You said 234 earlier. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, no. I'm sorry. I am an idiot sandwich. Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was like, did I do something wrong? I had to double check it. So
no. That's my bad. That's on me. Anywho, yes, 191.5. I mean, so we're just asking for him to hit one big play to Garrett Wilson, one big play to Anais Smith, or, just Mason Taylor bumbling, stumbling, rumbling. You just get one long touchdown, one long outlier touchdown. Breece Hall, I mean, one of the most explosive players in the league, a screen to Breece Hall. You just bust one of those loose. Now you just need like 80 passing yards a quarter the rest of the way. Like, that's very manageable. I really like, I hate how much I like this. You're making me way too comfortable, way too fast. Like I'm like, oh man, like I got some alt stuff cooking, but I don't really.
And the key is you need two things to happen. And this is what I mean, Jeremiah, when I talk about trying to minimize what we need to happen and just be right less, right? I want to be right less often because it's hard to be right more, right? Because for any 6-leg parlay, this doesn't go for yours, this goes for anything. You need 6 things to go right.
Yeah.
And each one of those has a probability associated with it. And usually when you're talking about how various books deal with these, right, you're talking about 6 things that need to happen, and each one of those has juice associated with it. And so when you stack it, oftentimes they're taking more and more on each of those legs.
On the middle.
So trying to minimize those and being as contrarian as possible and minimizing those. And if we can use it with data, even better. And I think Justin Fields is just the perfect example of a quarterback that has this wide distribution of outcomes that can easily throw it for 250 and has at least Garrett Wilson to make that happen. And they just might have a good offensive coordinator. I've seen interesting data from Steve Patton over at FTN, and they just might have a good offensive coordinator this year in Engstrand, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah.
And if you give Justin Fields a good offensive coordinator and Garrett Wilson, to me, there's a good chance that his over-unders later in the season might be like 220, 230, right? Whereas right now you're getting it at 190.
Yeah.
And that is something that I am definitely willing to take a risk on.
Well, would you say part of it is, it's Sunday night, we watch Football Night in America, and we see the highlights and we're surprised, and it's like, okay, we're going to go back to work on Monday, and we couldn't believe the run out of how it happened. We thought a certain way just about an hour before kickoff, and then of course every single week there's something different that hits us. Do you feel like there's a part of the psychology where pre-game or pre tonight into Sunday, where you're trying to think of that different outcome of how they can be delivering that information to you when you're watching Football Night in America before the Sunday night football game, and it's like how you can find what's going to happen that's different, because there's always something that we do not expect that turns out.
Yeah, there always is. And that's the thing, is that, like, especially early in the season, I think Bill Belichick once said that it's like September is just 4 more weeks of the preseason, right? Like September is a pretty crazy month in football where really crazy outlier events happen. And that's the perfect time to be betting tail events. It's the perfect time to be betting alt scenarios, right? Where no one else is going to think what you're thinking. And that's where you hammer. And the thing is that this very well could be wrong. Like everyone in the world might be right, but I would rather think that they're all wrong and that I'm the one that's right.
Well, would you say, like, the 6-leg parlay that I put down, where it seems like, hey, this is reasonable, but I'm getting squeezed so much over the accordion
That's the
out
problem. Yep.
that where I really have to hit and run pure on that so much. And like you said, there's so many extra factors, and it's like, hey, wear your seatbelt, don't get into a car accident.
That's exactly where I was getting, is that, like, especially when you do over parlays, but like when you have all these you have 6 different things that need to happen. All it takes is just the littlest thing to go wrong, and the whole thing crumbles, right? And I've seen plenty, like, you see it on Twitter all the time, but you see it in different places where people run out these kind of crazy big parlays that seem incredibly reasonable, or these these boosts that, like, either they just got to get 10 yards every quarter, but the actual independent events, and they're really deep in events, but these events that all come together are so much less likely when you stack them on each other. Mm-hmm. And that's why my goal often is to find events that are very correlated, but the books might not believe that they're correlated, or they don't have them priced into their models correctly. And so I try to find things that are correlated. And so an example here is Justin Fields goes nuclear, and the Jets, like the only way the Jets win is if Justin Fields goes nuclear. But if you stack those on top of each other, you can get really good odds, right? That's a good example of what I'm talking about. And so that's where I try to aim things is really just minimizing those legs, because every leg you add, the book is taking a little from you. They're scooping in. The house got to get their money, right? They're going to scoop a little at you. So you got to watch out for those when you start adding too many legs.
So I love it. So the follow-up, and hopefully those listening at home are thinking the same way as the question that I have here is, Joseph, how do we get to how you lean heavily into the 2 or the 3 legs to go contrarian? What occurs to you? What do you find and what do you see to where you're contrarian? You can tell enough, but you're going contrarian only for 2 or 3 outcomes. How do you start to think and build that correlation? Is there any kind of formative scenario where you're just kind of looking at the slate and just kind of hypothesizing? What goes into, hey, I've got my model here. How do you get to that destination where you're telling Chev and I, hey, I've got Justin Fields, he can run up on the passing yards, and the way he'll run up on the passing yards is the Jets are going to end up outright winning. How do you get to that? What gets one to the next?
Yeah, so the way that I and also thank you, Loctopus. Loctopus is a great member of my Discord, and we've been talking a lot lately. But the way that I approach these things oftentimes is I start it from kind of a top down or bottom up, and I guess I don't know which way to really refer to it. But I like to look at my models first and see where do my models think I have a big edge. And so like here we have like Jets versus Bills passing, right? So the models think I have a big edge. Okay, now let me look at like what does the Bills defense like to do? So this past week, the Bills defense allowed the most single coverage opportunities in the NFL, right? So they allowed the most single coverage opportunities to happen. It was like 60% of the routes that were ran against the Bills were single coverage opportunities. That's not great. They're not really good at defending single coverage opportunities. Hashtag Zay Flowers, right? So, they're not really good at defending those. And so the single coverage opportunities are the biggest way to hit tail events, because all it takes is for a receiver to blow past their man and boom, you just got a touchdown, right? And that's all it takes. So to me, that's a huge thing. And it's really correlative week to week. So defensive stability on single coverage opportunities is about 0.16. Right. So if you're that's pretty good. That means you can explain 16% of the variance in next week using this week. So the Bills were allowing a lot of single coverage opportunities. There's a chance that they may allow a lot of single coverage opportunities again, which often leads to tail event passing. And Justin Fields is a wide distribution player. So all those things kind of stack up in my head. And I'm like, okay, this is a good tail event. Like this is the scenario we want. That doesn't necessarily always happen, right? The Packers are the opposite. So the Packers are a team that does not allow a lot of single coverage opportunities. They play deep. They make sure people are being covered properly. They have a very sound defense. So they're a team where if the same bet came up, it said Fields passing against the Packers Fields passing against the Packers is something that is interesting. I would see that and I would be, okay, well, the Packers actually don't allow a lot of single coverage opportunities, which is not good for tail events. That's a bad thing for tail events. So I don't think that Fields is going to get there if he does it through Garrett Wilson or before Josh Reynolds will hurt him, or maybe now Arian Smith, if Arian Smith gets a chance. Go Dogs. So I think that then it would be like, oh, maybe Mason Taylor is going to get more targets because they're not running. Maybe Breece Hall is going to get more targets. Maybe the way that Justin Fields gets there is through those two players and not through his wide receivers. So like that's kind of at least an example of how I think about this is like, what kind of defense is this quarterback about to face? Do they pressure the quarterback a lot? Do they allow a lot of single coverage opportunities? And furthermore, I mean, to get more complex, do they disguise their coverages a lot? Do they run a lot of middle of the field open, middle of the field closed defenses? So this does get into like, I don't watch any film necessarily, but I do look at data that involves the film, right? I do look at data that deals with what kind of zone, what kind of man, what kind of middle of the field coverage are they running? And all of that matters, right? Every single one of those points matters to if a potential tail event is going to happen, or if it has a higher likelihood than maybe books think it can happen. I don't know if I said that right, but hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And the way that you just broke that down is why this is going to be such a beautiful show. Like being able to incorporate real actionable data from like what the teams are doing and then correlate that statistically with something that seems like a low probability outcome when in all honesty it is, but there's a complete pathway for this to be right. And all we have to do is be right 1 out of 10 times. And we've far outperformed and exceeded the yield that we spent. So
if the books think there's a 1% chance of something happening, and I think that there's a 5% chance of something happening, I'm going to bet that all day long, every single time. And if I'm wrong, so be it. If I'm right, well, I just made a lot of money.
Well, question on that, for longevity purposes, are you doing even betting units across this for this principle, or do you ever change it based on level of confidence?
I change. Well, so I'm not a professional bettor. I say that in my Substack about 1 billion times. I'm not even sure I'm good at gambling. That's my joke. I did win a lot of money last year, but and every year for the last 5 years. But I don't think that I'm necessarily good at it. I vary, at least from the betting perspective, right? Professional gamblers everywhere are throwing tomatoes at their screen, but like I very much like I keep a unit size and then I kind of just do it based off vibes on how I'm feeling about it. And if the model, like I will say, like if the model, when we get later in the season, week 2, we only have 1 week of data. Like the model is not going to be perfect in these scenarios. And so I'm going to take a little leniency and say like, the model might be wrong here for X, Y, and Z reasons. Right. And if I can find X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to lean into that. But later on in the season, I'll be a little bit more confident in the model, and I will be definitely leaning into the higher probability outcomes. And that's where I'm going to be putting more of my units in quotes. Like that's where I'll be putting more of my units, and then lower probability outcomes, less of my units.
So as far as bankroll management, as you get more data and information, because you had said, hey, the first month is kind of like extended preseason, you get deeper into the season. Do you feel like you have an even stronger anchor?
Yes, absolutely. My models typically rely on around 3 to 8 weeks of data, depending on the model. And so the more data I have, the better. After about 3 weeks, I start feeling pretty confident with what I'm doing. And I will definitely ramp up my weekly budget. We'll see what my wife says about that. But I will be ramping up my weekly budget probably around week 4, and I'll ramp that up. Probably I'll keep it ramping it up till week 8 and then keep it stable probably till like week 13 or so. And then I'll bring it back down, because towards the end of the season, the model gets the model both is good in some ways and bad in some ways. Certain teams stop trying. And so later on in the season, you really have to start like thinking like, okay, the model, I don't know, eventually Russell Wilson's going to get benched if the Giants keep playing like they are. Well, the model has seen Russell Wilson play in this Giants offense. It hasn't seen Jackson Dart play. So you starting need to have a little bit of leniency on like how you interpret the model after things start happening. Things start happening, right? Early in the year, things aren't really happening that are that crazy, but later on, injuries are going to happen. We're going to see quarterback swaps. We're going to see coaches get fired, and chaos is going to ensue. And when that chaos ensues, that's when we have to start taking a little bit more leniency in some of our positions.
Is that where you would put a little bit more of your thumb on the scale? Say Jackson Dart gets in week 5 versus Saints, and you just kind of throw some of the model out of what is being spit out. Is that kind of?
I mean, I wouldn't say throw it out, but it's like, what does the model think here, and then what is my opinion of the new situation? So, like, just for instance, like if it depends on how bad it gets with Russell Wilson, right? But if for instance it's really really bad with Russell Wilson and he's just doing completely awful, and the model is like super low on the Giants, and then Jackson Dart comes in, I'm going to have a different opinion as if Russell Wilson's been playing average or slightly above average, and they bench him anyways and put Jackson Dart in. And then I'm probably going to take the model's opinion a little bit more seriously, and I might even downgrade the Giants depending, right? It really just, it's a very situational case-by-case situation that's like, what is the model saying about this team? How's that team performing? And then how big of a change is happening, right? Like what kind of massive changes are happening, or not that massive a changes are happening for the teams.
So here's a question, because we've painted a picture from a theory perspective, and I want to see if I have developed enough of a feel for what would be kind of an alt sort of play. Like, what about, all right, so we've got Christian McCaffrey taking on the New Orleans Saints. This is a game where, there's a lot of, there's basically the replacements playing. I mean, Spencer Rattler's a starter, but he's not really a starter. Mac Jones is starting. So how would you play a game like this, for example?
Christian I thought you were about to tell me. I thought you were going to see if you.
I'm framing it, but Christian McCaffrey, 2 touchdowns scored, under 81.5 rushing yards, and the Saints to win.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I would say that's contrarian. I think that the thing that I would say that I don't, and this is different people have different opinions about this in the Tails community. I tend to not lean into like unders as much when I can help it. It depends, right? It really depends on the under situation. It depends. So I don't know what the odds on that would end up being, but going into unders is hard because unders only go so far down. You know what I mean? Usually you don't have all unders on markets. You can't be like, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to have 10 yards. You can't do that. And because of that, it just makes it a little tougher to lean into the alt on. So like if we think about the distribution, right, it's like a bell curve, right? And the left tail we don't really get to bet on it. That's not really a thing that name of the show hashtag. But you don't really get to bet on that left tail of outcomes that much. You have to bet on the whole thing. You don't get to bet on like the far left side of it. The right tail, we get alts, right? We get like you can bet on this section, this section, this section, and this section. And so that's why the right tail, at least in my opinion, is where I try to aim when I'm doing these bets. A lot of my Discord community has talked to me about this, but they're like, what about all unders? And I'm like, well, they don't really exist. I mean, there's a few, you can find a few things out there, but there's just not a lot. And so I typically try to lean into overs, but it's very specific all overs that I try to lean into. I do think that 49ers game has an interesting all over situation. I mentioned it in my Substack, but Mac Jones is also a perfect example of a wide distribution quarterback in a scheme that is known for producing like backups come in and then they have 300 yards passing, right? Yeah. Like that's like a perfect alt like play right there. The question would be like, what do I stack that with? I never really got into that because the lines didn't come out until after I had posted my Substack, so I haven't like researched that a ton at this point. But you probably want to stack that with like Ricky Pearsall or stack it with maybe even a Tungus, see what happens. Get a little Tungus involved in your life. But I think that there's something there, and I definitely don't mind even a standalone leg in like if I was doing like a uncorrelated parlay, a standalone leg of Mac Jones 250 passing, right? Like that's the odds on that are pretty good. And I definitely do not mind a standalone leg in a parlay being Mac Jones 250 passing. If I was doing like a small like 3-leg or less parlay where I'm looking at uncorrelated plays, I think that he's an interesting tail event that can happen.
Mac Jones being you hit the nail on the head where you can reference, past events, and that's what your model's taking into account, where you're like, hey, the 49ers have a history of backups coming in and throwing for, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard. It's
Brock Purdy
over.
At one point was that guy. It was like, man, Brock Purdy starting? Okay, whatever.
Right. So and you just saw him be serviceable in Jacksonville to get BTJ to basically fantasy superstardom and, one of the best 10 rookie seasons statistically of all time. So yeah, that's the type of thing. See, this is where I knew I was at the gate of a gated community.
You're on the right track, maybe the wrong train,
Yeah, I'm just, hey, we're trying to get there. We're going to figure it out. But guys, are there any other plays that you guys want to kind of discuss, or just more so the theory of what people that are listening right now should be looking for going into the weekend?
Well, I think one that we could get into a bet that you want to talk about, Jeremiah, but it deals with the game I think we're both interested in.
Okay.
And that's the Cardinals and the Panthers, right?
Okay,
so
good.
yeah, so the Cardinals have a very nice passing matchup, we'll say. The Panthers get basically no pressure. Last week, I think they had like an 8% pressure rate or something crazy. Like they were not getting, hopefully I said that right. The Panthers had a less than 8% pressure rate. It was like nothing. And they didn't get any pressure last year. So I'm just going to assume they're going to continue to not get any pressure. And Kyler Murray is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL from an EPA perspective when he's not getting pressured. On top of that, the Panthers ran a ton of zone last week, and they ran a ton of zone last year. So I'm just going to take a guess and say they're going to keep running a ton of zone. Trey McBride thrives. He has a pretty decent targets per route run when we get into zone situations. James Conner also gets more targets when we get into zone situations. And then on top of that, the Panthers had kind of a bad run defense, as we've seen. I'm not sure that the Cardinals' run game is nearly as good as the Jaguars. But, there might be something there. Maybe they could break off a run or two. But really, that game is ripe for some Cardinals alts, I think, leaning into Kyler passing and leaning into either Trey McBride receiving or James Conner receiving. And then I think on the other side, just to mention it real quick, and then I'll let you go, Jeremiah, but Ted McMillan is one of the best players in the NFL from a PWOPper standpoint. And Xavier Legette is also pretty shockingly good in a PWOPper standpoint, like way better than his line suggests, right? Like I am very interested in betting some alt overs on Xavier Legette just because his line is so low and his PWOPper was in like good wide receiver 2 territory, like a good wide receiver 2 territory. And I'm talking about through the NFL, not through like just one team. Like he had good PWOPper. And so I'm interested in maybe pushing some alt overs on that. And Ted McMillan, some all overs as well as that. So, yeah, you go, Jeremiah.
I'm so excited because my smooth brain, before we get into the game theory of what you have been talking about, which is absolutely rich, I've been thinking, hey, Trey McBride, touchdown regression, it has to be here. But part of my fear point, which may be more of a middle bet towards the juice, is I want the entire game. Because if I wanted to bet and get better juice odds, I see anytime first half touchdown for Trey McBride standalone plus 350. But then I'd rather get plus 165 across an entire game because I don't know how it's going to run out as far as it's been very tough on Trey McBride for the touchdown run out. So I guess for me, if I'm trying to find a path, I feel like I'm on a path unbeknownst to your model. And you're talking about your model with the Cardinals and the Panthers. So how do you take me, who's somewhat of a basic better, a straight better in this situation where I'm taking the regression where I might get the book this time, but hey, out of all last season, 17 games, he had 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns for the one he fell on. So you lost a lot more than you gained. And if I get the regression and maybe he gets to 10 touchdowns, I'm still even with the books to a 17-game season. With the juice and accounting, I'm not really getting ahead. So how do I rubber band and pull back to launch forward? Do I go into something crazy where it's first quarter Trey McBride, first half Trey McBride, anytime touchdown? You mentioned some different spots that you like. You love Teteroa McMillan, which I am pumped about, and James Conner. How do we make a 2 to 3 leg parlay in this situation for the Cardinals in the Panthers game where there is, as you're saying, a wide distribution to where we can get high odds good in our favor?
Yeah, so I guess the first point I want to talk about is touchdown bets are like interesting. Maybe it's the right word. I definitely like to add a touchdown here and there, right? It really depends. So I think regression is a key word that you just said. Season to season regression is really hard to like deal with. Like I guess like so. Trey McBride didn't score a lot of touchdowns last year, but he's really good, so he should score more touchdowns this year. I like that theory. Like I'm good with that. Like that is, I'm fully on board with that. He's going against coverages that should definitely allow him to have some touchdown opportunities. Whether he gets that or not, I don't know, but he'll have the opportunities, hopefully. But as far as like first quarter and first half touchdowns, I typically stay away from stuff like that, right? Because the odds are very difficult to, I guess, like manage against the books, right? They have better simulations for stuff like that than we do, at least for us three, right? Even me included, they have better simulations for like play-by-play simulations to be like, okay, their chances of scoring the first half touchdown are this. It's really hard to create models like that, and to the point where I haven't done that, right? To do like first half, first quarter kind of stuff. I would lean away from timing the touchdown. The idea that he would possibly score a touchdown, I'm all for. I do think that you'd want to stack that with something, though. And at least in my opinion, for something like that, I would stack it with Panthers sides of things. So usually when you have both sides of a game, you can kind of boost those odds pretty nicely. So I would be looking at, say, like, I don't know, Tet McMillan to get like 90 yards, Xavier Legette to get, say, 40, 50 yards, something like that, and then Trey McBride touchdown. I don't know what those odds are. I haven't looked at it. I just made that up as we're talking, right? Like, that's something I would look at is if I was like specifically aiming at a Trey McBride touchdown. On my Substack, I tell a few different stories about this game that could happen. I think that there are two main things that could really happen in this game, but I think that Carolina could very much focus on the run. They could go all out to stop James Conner because they did get kind of embarrassed at the end of last season by James Conner, right? Yeah. So I think that the Panthers could go all out to stop him, in which Kyler airs it out. And at that point, I think something like Kyler 280 and Trey McBride getting 70 with James Conner, say, getting over 2.5 receptions is a good core to the bet. And then adding, say, Tetaroa at 100 plus, you get a plus 5,500 bet. It's a 4-leg parlay, which I don't love that specific part of it. But you do three things and then you have a bring back, right? That's a very GPP strategy for people that are familiar with DFS, right? You have this core of things that you think are very likely, which we just talked about. Kyler has a passing advantage. Trey McBride and James Conner have a coverage advantage against zone and specifically cover 3, which the Panthers love to run. And then on the other side, you have Tetaroa, who's a top 15 wide receiver and P-Whopper, and who kind of needs some regression last week. He was wide open for like a touchdown like 3 times last week. You have this regression on his side with an ascending quarterback. Boom, you just got plus 5,500 on the story that makes a lot of sense and deals with like math and coverages that all kind of work out, right? And I would try to, like, I think 4 is the max I would deal with there, right? Like, and I really wouldn't mind if someone wanted to cut a leg off that and just bet it at 3 legs with worse odds. That's perfectly fine. If you got a plus 3,000 bet, that's still really good, right? That's still like a 2% chance of happening. It's not really high. At least that's the implied probability on it. I think that's how I would approach it. So hopefully that makes sense.
Well, and to your point, when you talked about cutting 4 legs to 3 legs, at what point does he cut down on the plus odds? Where are you sitting there saying, you know what, I'd rather boomerang and rubber band back and go for higher odds payout and stay away? Is it plus 500, really plus 1,000? What?
I'd almost never bet anything less than plus 1,000. I've basically never, at least since I've been doing this, I don't bet anything less than plus 1,000. On my Substack, I basically never put anything out there under plus 2,000. I almost always put everything above plus 2,000 when I'm talking.
Does that go play into part of the psychology of if I'm doing it right for the math, plus 1,000? Hey, I nail 1 out of 10. I'm staying alive and I'm continuing.
A little bit, yeah. That's definitely a part of it. It's a little bit of bankroll management thinking about it. Like I generally think I'm decent enough at this that I should be able to do it. Like that's kind of how I view it, is that I should be able to hit something as long as I'm smart about it. I do think that there are some nuclear options to approach this Cardinals game with. That's what I call the crazy stuff out there, right? Just to get in it. But I think that there's a chance. What if the Panthers actually can't stop the run and the Panthers have to play catch up, right? So like, what about a world where James Conner breaks off a big run Even though he's not really known for doing that, I think I wouldn't mind a Trey Benson bet where he does this, but I haven't seen the lines for it. I've been jokingly saying cowards when I refer to the books about this.
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't know if I'm
you're not posting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think that Trey Benson has a chance to break off the long run, and I would like to bet alts on him. I just don't know the lines on it yet. But like a James Conner 100 yards, Tet 100 yards, McBride 6 receptions with the idea that he's kind of the chain mover. Like they run it a little bit, McBride catches a pass to move the chains. They run it a little bit, McBride catches a pass to move the chains. That idea. And then Xavier Legette 40. So that's another 4-leg parlay, which remember I don't like. When I first wrote that bet, it had a plus 15,000 odds. 4 legs plus 15,000 odds. Not 1,500, 15,000. That means every dollar you bet, you get 150.
Wow. Yeah.
So these are the types of odds where, normally you're just making a lottery ticket for a plus 15,000. Like you can tell yourself a Cinderella story where all those things happen without having to say, okay, well, I need this and this and this from this game. You're not going to be able to all get it in one spot, but with using math and just knowing ball and saying, hey, the Panthers' Ejiro Ivero is going to just sit in cover 3 and get toasted all game long. And that's going to create opportunities for Trey McBride and James Conner. So
exactly,
you can alt and bump those receptions up, and it goes to an ungodly place just off 4 things happening and just knowing a little bit of football. So this is really exciting for me because being able to get something that, if you're going to be able to get plus 10,000 off of 3 things happening, if we somehow land in that spot, and Joseph, obviously this is our flagship, launching whatever, like we're going to sharpen this up to where we're coming in with, I'm going to be way sharper as far as coming in with plays that fit this sort of thing, and we can, or this model specifically in the thought process, because this is all great stuff. Like I said, a plus 15,000 ticket for 4 things happening is pretty unheard of.
And really, they're not like 4. They're 4 things that would make a lot of sense in like a GPP outcome, right? So like a lot of the way I structure these bets are like guaranteed prize pool is what that stands for in DFS, right? Daily fantasy, for people that may be watching and don't know. But the idea is that, we just need we need to get the story right. If we can get the story right, we need few things to happen to maximize our profits, right? Like how can we make, how can we get a 150x on our profit by getting the story right? And that's how I generally approach things.
Well, what's cool is, hey, I start this game in talking about this game. Hey, I've got the Trey McBride touchdown 1-for-1, and it's plus 165 odds anytime touchdown. And then we get to what was really fun there is the narrative that you could come across on, like you said, 3 legs, 4 legs, that gets it to the 15,000 plus odds versus me hammering, trying to hem and haw with the books. Joseph, what do you think part of the pricing on something like that, when you can tell a logical story, are we in essence being able to play against the books, not understanding that logic and pumping out a big number for you and not necessarily keeping up?
It depends, I guess. So like if you go on like a intense inverse correlation bets, absolutely, right? Like, so the idea that James Conner gets 100 yards, that really goes against Panthers offense. So if you stack James Conner rushing with Panthers offensive output, it's the bets are gonna go nuclear. So the key there is that James Conner has to break off a run, because if he doesn't, then the books are right? So if James Conner doesn't break off a long touchdown run, or not even touchdown necessarily. It could be like Trey Benson's last week. He broke off a 60-yard run and didn't score a touchdown, but that accelerates the game, right? So these bets, or at least if we're betting both sides, of a game, we are aiming at how can we accelerate this game usually, right? So Ted McMillan scoring a deep touchdown accelerates the game. right? So that like thinking of stories that accelerate the game. And that's why if Trey Benson had a line, I would have actually probably put that in the bet. So for my Substack people out there, I would probably prefer a Trey Benson alt rushing because his chances of breaking off a run are higher than James Conner's chances of breaking off a run. And that's what I'm more interested in. It's not necessarily the rushing attempts. I actually really hope his rushing attempts are low. I want as few rushing attempts as possible to get to that 100. And then like that's why we need a break off. We need him to break off a run and then for the Panthers to have to answer back. Right? That's the ultimate kind of that in this specific bet, that's what we're aiming at.
And wouldn't the Trey Benson alt rushing lines be more of a plus odds just because of the fact that
he's the backup? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I'm way more interested. Like I just haven't seen them yet. Like I am way more interested in doing some alt Trey Benson.
You want that price?
I just don't know it just wasn't out when I was looking at it. So I'm very interested in a Trey Benson alt rushing. In the hopes that maybe he kind of becomes the 1A instead of the 1B, right? Like Trey Benson alt rushing, and then the Panthers have to answer. You know, that's the idea. He breaks off a run, Panthers have to answer, which is kind of what happened last week with Travis Etienne, by the way. But guess what? The Panthers didn't answer. That's the thing that didn't go right last week, right? Yeah. But Travis Etienne broke off a big run, which made his prop go crazy. If you would have bet Travis Etienne 100 plus last week, and then I would have very much liked some Panthers offense, but the Panthers just didn't have the offense to match it, right? Mm-hmm. But the odds would go nuclear when you have those things together.
So inverse correlation is the driving force behind this theory, whereas you see the book sees these things as, you know, juxtaposed, like they're not going to go together, where they fit together like peanut butter and jelly. Like it just
in this specific example, yes. In this specific example.
Yes. So you're boosting the odds because, like you said, if you think that there's a 5% chance something happens and there's, you know, the book is saying there's a 1% chance, there's leverage created right there. And if you're just
leverage is the key. That's all I'm aiming at. That's all I care about is leverage.
Yeah. So, all right. Is there anything? I mean, we were supposed to go for 30 minutes, and
we're having too much fun.
I know. We've been absolutely like you guys have been absolutely cooking. I was just like, talk, more. Because I mean, I'm so interested in the theory behind it, and obviously we'll be able to talk, like give more of the actual like, hey, we want these plays. I wanted to discuss more of the theory and have the foundation of, hey, this is what we're gonna talk about. And how we can find those opportunities and take advantage of them. And you hopefully tail us and give you the keys to generational wealth here. So
that would be the hope. I think, like, to give one more example real fast in our last 3 minutes of talking about this, another example of an inverse correlation, and this one's a pretty popular one you see on Twitter, right, is a receiver getting a deep threat receiver getting a lot of yards, a touchdown, and then going under their receptions. Yes. Right. So the books, sometimes books won't even let you bet that. Sometimes books will not even let you bet that. But like this week, I think there's two really good ways of leaning into this. And actually, as we've been talking, I kind of had a third one. But the Alec Pierce, I think there's a chance. His P-Whopper is really good. He last week he was by far in a way like nowhere close the wide receiver 2 in that Colts offense. I don't know if that's going to stay, but he was right. He was by far and away the wide receiver 2 last week, and he was running deep routes. He's about to go up against like the team that runs the most man coverage in the NFL. Right? They love running man coverage. I will say there's a lot of problems as far as like the Broncos may just destroy the Colts. Right? Who knows? They may like the defense may just eat Daniel Jones alive. But I don't really care about that. Honestly, in a way, I hope that happens for a little while so that the Colts are having to throw the ball deep. You know, like I hope that like towards the end of the game they have to bomb it a few times. But if we go Alec Pierce 60 and a touchdown, and then Alec Pierce under 2.5 receptions, you can get that at probably like plus 15,000. Right? I don't know what the exact odds are. I checked it earlier, and I think it was around there. I don't know what it is right this moment. But you can get that at really good odds. And I think that the chances of that happening aren't exactly small, right? Like I think that he can beat cover 1. He's pretty decent at it. He could beat a man coverage, score a touchdown. They probably aren't going to put Pat Surtain on Alec Pierce if I had to guess, but who knows? So that's one angle. And then an angle that I like almost as much, if not a little bit more, is Tyquan Thornton against the Eagles. I think that he probably had 150 yards last week if like Patrick Mahomes just saw him running wide open downfield. He had a very good game last week that I don't think was noticed by a lot of people. And he's about to play a secondary that I think might not be good. We'll see, but I'm not sure the Eagles are exactly good. And Adoree Jackson is just begging to give up a touchdown to Tyquan Thornton in my head. So I think that there is and also on top of all that, Tyquan Thornton is a route-based hero, which is a model that I come out with every week. But he's in a positive regression standpoint, right? There's a lot of positive regression signs for Tyquan Thornton. And I think that there is a good chance that he will accelerate that game. We talk about accelerating the game. There's a good chance that he'll do that. And so I very much like the idea of Tyquan Thornton catching a deep pass for a touchdown and accelerating that game, which goes into another tail event that's in my Substack. If you want to see that, check that out.
Cooking.
Yes.
Absolutely cooking. Like this has been really, really sharp. So that's just the inverse correlation theory, talking with, just to give you guys an example of a play that you can come back to. Alec Pierce under 2.5 receptions, over 60 and a half yards. Was that
60? Yeah, over 60. I mean,
yeah, over alts 60 plus yards and a touchdown, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Just maximize your odds on that. Come back to us. Let us know how that worked. And then you could also go with Tyquan Thornton for what's our line set out on Tyquan Thornton?
1.5.
Yeah, so that's the problem. The 1.5, I'm a little bit. Yeah, those will make your odds go crazy, but I would like it to be 2.5. That's right. Just that You're really hoping, because the problem is he catches a 50-yard touchdown and you just lost your bet. Right. Like if he, like the moment he catches a 50-yard touchdown, it's over. And so that's what scares me about the 1.5 is that at least if you're at 2.5, he could catch another deep touchdown, or he could catch like a 10-yard first down and you're okay. Right. Whereas if it's a 2.5, like a 1.5, it's just you're all or nothing. And that's a little bit too much for me, though. I'm sure there's some sickos out there that are good for that.
Yeah, we're chasing nothing but upside here. But before we get out of here, this has been the inaugural episode of Bet On It, sponsored by ProfitX. ProfitX is a peer-to-peer sports prediction app and website where you can go and eliminate the house by, putting in tickets or putting in odds and submitting plays against other peers, eliminating the house, allowing you to get truly the best odds on the market. So sign up for ProfitX using promo code FFD. I'm on there this week, and I'm going to be playing Mac Jones over 1.5 passing touchdowns. That's currently set at plus 186. So join me over on ProfitX and, sign up using promo code FFD. This has been an episode of Bet On It. Guys, before we get out of here, Jeremiah, tell everybody where they can find you.
Hey, you can find me on X at Coach Wrestlaff1. I'm over at Player Profiler. Find me. DD Fantasy Football. It's Best Ball Night School. And then, of course, Chev. It's funny, Chev, we show up on all these shows and it's like, wait, this guy's here, that guy's here. I keep seeing them in the same spots. Fantasy Sports Advice Network. We have the Dynasty Poll. So there's a whole lot there. Very grateful, very happy to be with you, gentlemen. And this was just like a rich hour of just soaking up information. So Joseph, I feel like it's been great for our audience, and the benefit is I feel like I've had a front row seat. So very happy to be with both of you gentlemen tonight and in the following weeks. Very excited for this show.
Joseph.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremiah. I've really enjoyed being on here. I think that this is, I just like the ability to be on a consistent show, to get our picks out there, to try to help people bet smarter, right? Like I think, I don't know, I've talked to so many people in my lives that they're like, yeah, I had an 11-leg parlay and I almost hit. And I'm like, but did you did you almost hit that? I don't really know if you did. And I want to try to help people bet smarter. And and try to lean into what the books maybe aren't catching. And we can do that with math and statistics, right? Like I think that there's a lot of people out there that maybe it's nerd stuff. I feel it. I see it. I watch the games. I know how it feels.
Yeah.
You need math and you need ball knowledge, right? You need both. And that's where I want to try to help people. You can find me at Koala TY Stats, both on Twitter, X, and Substack. I write articles for PFF. If you just search my name on PFF, you can find me there. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, man, this has been, like I said, I feel like I was like, all right, cool. We can kind of get the gist of the show out there, and you can get the theory. We gave you a few plays, and we're going to come back next week with more plays because we'll have more information from the model, from the man, the myth, the math magician himself, Joseph Bryan. I'm the legendary ball knower, aka Chev GPT. Until next time, we'll see you soon.